everybody, and welcome back to another brand new video today where we are continuing with the classic Doctor Who reviews as always. This week it's the return of the Tom Baker era. We're back continuing after the arc in space a few weeks ago. We're coming back today for the Sontaran experiment. So yes, this is the two-part story for Doctor Who, which was quite a rarity in the classic series, of course. We hadn't, I believe, had another two-part story since The Rescue, which aired back in 1964 or 5, I can't actually remember, but I think 1964, because it was the introductory story for Vicky, of course, with William Hartnell's Doctor. And so we come to 1975, and we have this opportunity to have another two-part story in the Sontaran experiment. This very much came out of a sort of necessity from the new producer, Philip Hinchcliffe, that he wanted to get away from having loads of six-parters stacking up each series like we saw in the Pertwee era. And because of the kind of hangover from the previous seasons and the production, the way it was done, so it was intended you were going to have the 4 parts serial of Robot, and then you were going to have the 6-part story after that, and then another 6-parter in Genesis of the Daleks before Revenge of the Cybermen, and then Terror of the Zygons originally was going to be the kind of concluding serial for that. But they decided that in reality it would be better to split it off into a 4 and a 2, and to just to create 2 separate stories and just not have these continuous dragging on 6-parters, which sometimes can kind of make the series lag a little bit, and just having that lack of new and fresh stories I think could sometimes hinder the show in the Pertwee era. So that was the decision they made, and it certainly had a good impact, I think. The other sort of production thing that was quite interesting around this was the decision taken that usually in a 6-part story there's roughly kind of 4 episodes worth of studio time used, and roughly 2 episodes worth of location footage used on a sort of standard 6-part story, should we call it. And so it made logical sense for them to split that up and have the 4-part story as a studio-based story of the arc in space that's only set in studio, there isn't a single location shot in there, and then have the Sontaran experiment where it's all on location and there isn't a single studio shot in there. Now, of course, this does present a range of problems in terms of creating a storyline like this and the whole production side of it as well, because you're purely out on location. You're in the lap of the gods in terms of the weather, among other things, having to find suitable locations. For the script, it's got to be completely set outside and on location. You can't really have any interior shots of any sort, which is why, of course, we don't see inside pretty much. I don't think we see inside the Sontarans. Steyr, the Field Marshal's ship, we don't really see inside that at all very much in this story, because it's all set on location, and there's just the big dome there that is his spaceship rather than anything more interesting inside. And yeah, it just presents so many challenges, I think, around doing this. It's also worth noting that, rather interestingly, I hadn't realised this until I watched it again, was that this was actually shot on videotape and not on film. They for whatever reason got some new sort of lighter weight videotape cameras in that they wanted to try out on a location shoot, and so I decided, let's go for it and let's use them for completely for this story. And so it means you get, because there's just such a distinctive difference in the look between videotape and film in classic Doctor Who. It's so clear, you see it no matter what. I can always tell if a shot's being shot on film or videotape. It's just, you notice it. As much as they tried to hide it with the way they were cutting and things, it's always there. And so very, very early on, I was quite confused, because I'm watching this and I'm like, I can see this is on location, but it also looks like videotape. So I had to Google it and look it up to find out. I thought, oh, for some reason they decided this story, they're going to try out some new videotape cameras and see what it looks like. And I personally don't love it. I much prefer the film look that you get from a film camera out on location. I just think it always looks better and just kind of also tells you this is location footage. This has got a bit more scale to it than a set, which I always quite liked as well. So yeah, I was pleased that that wasn't really something that continued on very much. And of course, it's not really until I think the McCoy era that they just use videotape. Back in the last couple of seasons of Doctor Who or Classic Who in the future, from this point of view in the show, they decided to use pure videotape for the last 2 or 3 seasons, I think it was. But anyway, that's most of the basics of the sort of production side of things. We should talk about the actual story itself. And it was a story that I didn't really have great expectations in going into. I had seen it before, goodness knows how many years ago, so I didn't really recollect anything much about it. And actually, I did really, really enjoy it. I found it to be quite an interesting and engaging plot where you were kind of a little bit unsure about exactly what was going on. We're supposed to be on this uninhabited future Earth that they're coming down to check is just ready to be inhabited. There's these mysterious astronauty people who've turned up, or future people or whatever, who for some reason are all South African, which is just the idea that the dialect was going to change in the future, and so for some reason it would turn up being 1970s South African. Don't know why, but that's what they decided to do. And I think it works okay. I don't think it's a big deal really, but it's just the kind of mystery setup. I like that we start straight away with them down on Earth, the Doctor and co appearing there, and then going off to try and sort of search things out. You get the classic mysterious person watching on from in the distance, a not very well realised robot, shall we say, but then eventually the Sontaran being revealed as well. It was notable for me how dark this story was. I feel like I just realised more and more of Classic Who that I watch sort of again in one run of how many dark ideas and just things in episodes there are, given that this was supposed to be a kind of family to children show. The kind of boundaries that they pushed in this show so consistently is quite surprising at times, given the depiction of a guy that was chained up, completely dehydrated, having had no water for days, and left to just die. That's a really dark idea. The whole thing about having a weight on top of a person, seeing how long you could push down, how long a body will take, so how much weight it will take for a body to crush. That's also a really creepy and deadly and weird idea. Just all these different tests that the Sontaran was carrying out was so very kind of dark and interesting, but also quite dark in a way, I think. And to be honest, the actual pure idea of a Sontaran coming down on Earth, testing out a load of things on humans to find out their weaknesses before they attack, is not an idea that I actually hate that much. Like, I think it's alright. I think it's quite kind of... I don't remember anything particularly like it in other episodes of Doctor Who. Maybe it's not the most logical thing for an alien race to do first, rather than just get people to do some research about these people and find their weaknesses that way. They feel the need to actually send somebody down there, poke them with a stick and test them out and find out what's wrong with them before they can then go and attack. And the fact that they're like ready for attack, but like, we're an hour away from the attack, just give us the report and then we can fly in. It's not like you need to analyse the report at all or anything like that to check what their weaknesses are. Nah, it doesn't matter. Just go for it. So yeah, some of that was stretching the credulity of it a little bit, maybe, but as a pure concept, I did quite like it, to be honest. In particular, I think the cliffhanger at the end of episode 1 is particularly strong. It's kind of a rehash to an extent of the Time Warrior, where we see the Sontaran taking off the helmet for the first time, but I think it's a particularly great moment because Sarah, of course, has seen the Sontaran before in the Time Warrior, and so that kind of just excellent facial expressions by Elizabeth Slade in that moment, and that sort of shock and surprise that there's a Sontaran here again. I thought he was killed. Like, how can there be another one here again? And that pure shock and terror on her face in that moment, just so, I think, brilliantly captured how kind of deadly this creature was, and the moment of pure fear and terror that kind of sets up such a great cliffhanger, I think. So I thought that worked really, really effectively there in just having the classic Doctor Who cliffhanger. Now, as I'm sure many of you will know, the production team were presented with more challenges, particularly in episode 2, because Tom Baker fell and broke his collarbone, and it was all rather nasty, and means that's why his scarf is quite well wrapped around his neck through a lot of the second episode, and it's also why there's a huge amount of shots that are using a stunt double rather than Tom Baker himself. Obviously, most of the fight scenes were going to anyway, because Tom's wasn't the sort of person who was going to do those kind of crazy fight scenes with the Sontaran, but there were even more shots than planned, I think, that included the stunt double, just because Tom wasn't really fit to do a lot of the shots that he was supposed to be able to do. And I think watching the documentary about it and the stuff behind that as well, the sort of the absolute worry on sort of Philip Hinchcliffe's face would have been, and sort of the feeling he had around the time when suddenly the leading man of the whole show is injured and seemingly not going to be able to keep filming. It's kind of a complete disaster for the whole programme. It's amazing, really, that we've never had any major problem with that up until now. Like, it's a testament to health and safety and things like that, that there's never been a really big issue with the Doctor or whoever's playing the Doctor at the time having some sort of genuinely major injury that's meant they can't continue filming the series for whatever reason. As far as I know, that's never happened. And in 57 years, I think that's quite impressive, quite frankly. So yeah, you had these sort of slightly nervous moments at times, I think. We certainly saw that for Tom in this episode, in this story, and he obviously was quite worried that he might just get replaced as well, given it was very early on in the season and he hadn't actually had an episode aired yet. They could have easily just changed it, and so he felt even more so that he had to come back and just do it. And obviously, he came back and he completely owned the role, let's be honest. Ultimately, the ending does kind of feel like a bit of a blur. Just suddenly, the Sontaran spaceship gets blown up in a pretty poorly realised effect, because it seems to just be a fade to white, basically, with the explosion sound effect, and then suddenly the thing's gone. You don't actually see any of it blowing up, because they couldn't afford to do that, obviously. And then pretty quickly, the story suddenly ended. They've jumped on the teleport to teleport off what they think is back to the Nerva beacon, so that they can go and get the TARDIS back, but it's obviously, as we find out in Genesis of the Daleks, going to turn out not to be the case. One other thing that I did notice while watching this story was I felt it was the kind of first story where we really saw kind of Tom Baker coming out in the role of the Doctor, sort of more so than ever before. Just in some of the random things that he just says, the kind of witty remarks to some of the sort of alien, the humans who were back on Earth in the future when he was kind of getting interrogated and things. It just sort of felt the kind of Tom Baker Doctor I know and remember and love. It felt like for the first time properly that was really coming out in this story, and it was just so great to see. It just showed how much it was just Tom Baker playing the Doctor, and Tom was just Tom, but also the Doctor exactly the same time, and it just works so brilliantly. And it was such a different portrayal to what we got used to with John Pertwee, but I just was so kind of bought into it and invested in it in the story in particular, I noticed, and it just really, really clicked for me, I found. Just overall, the Sontaran Experiment is a better story than what I remembered. It's not the greatest Doctor Who story of all time, but it still actually is a pretty strong story. I think it works quite well, given that it's only a two-parter and doesn't have much time to expand, and the restriction of location, film, and only. I think it does reutilize a past villain in quite a good way with a reasonably interesting new idea to create quite an interesting and exciting story. But guys, I want to hear your comments down below. Please do let me know what you think of the Sontaran experiment. Is it one of the better Sontaran stories? Of course, there's only really 4 of them in the classic series, but do let me know what your favourite of those is as well. I'd love to hear that. Does the Time Warrior still kind of top this one, or does actually the Sontaran experiment your favourite of the bunch? I'd love to hear what you have to think in the comments down below. But apart from that, guys, as always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new one. Goodbye.